My name is Anastasia Volkova. I am 35 years old, and I am standing in a designer dress at my father Viktor Volkov's lavish $7 million 66th birthday party. For years, I have felt like an outsider in the perfect family portrait. Today, as the champagne flowed and the Moscow elite made small talk, my father publicly humiliated me with words that finally confirmed what I had always felt. Little did he know that the DNA test results in my purse would change everything. Sometimes family secrets remain buried until someone decides to dig them up. Looking back at my childhood photos, I realized that the differences were always noticeable. My siblings, Mikhail, Svetlana, and Dmitry, were all blessed with Viktor's golden hair and bright blue eyes, and there was me, an anomaly with wavy brown hair and hazel eyes. "Do you take after your grandmother?" my mother, Alina, would say whenever I asked about our differences. I accepted the explanation, even though neither grandmother had those traits. The physical differences were just the beginning. Viktor Volkov, a Moscow construction magnate whose company, Volkov Development, built projects all over the Central Federal District, never seemed to look at me the same way he looked at his other children. When Mikhail scored a goal in football, Viktor lifted him onto his shoulders. When Svetlana won dance competitions, he gave her roses and twirled her around in his arms. Dmitry's victories in science Olympiads were celebrated with sumptuous dinners in a restaurant. My academic achievements, invariably superior to those of my brother and sisters, were acknowledged only with absent-minded nods and stock phrases like, "good job." The Volkov family lived in a huge mansion on Rubliovka, one of Moscow's most prestigious suburbs. 6 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, an indoor and outdoor pool, and a 3-car garage that housed Viktor's collection of luxury cars. The parties turned out to be an ideal Russian family: a successful businessman father, an elegant housewife mother, and 4 beautiful, gifted children. Our New Year's cards were the envy of all the neighbors, but inside these flawless walls, the reality was different. When I was 8, my parents were called from school because no one had picked me up 2 hours after classes ended. Viktor was supposed to pick me up that day, but he apparently forgot because of a sudden business meeting. My mother was with Dmitry at the doctor's. I never forgot the pitiful look of the school secretary. New Year's morning in the Volkov's house was a grandiose show with mountains of presents under a perfectly decorated 4-meter Christmas tree. From year to year, I noticed the same pattern. My brother and sisters unwrapped the latest gaming consoles, designer clothes, and expensive electronics. My gifts, while nice enough to avoid obvious complaints, were always noticeably cheaper and less thoughtful. One year, when I was 12, all 3 of them got a new laptop. I'm a gift certificate, but I tried. God, how I tried to earn Viktor's approval. I worked myself to exhaustion studying, graduating from elementary school with top grades. In high school, I signed up for all sorts of clubs and sections, hoping that he would come to at least one of my performances. By the age of 14, I had a theory that I was adopted. That would explain both the physical differences and the emotional distance. I searched the home office for adoption papers while my parents were at one of Viktor's charity events. Instead, I found my birth certificate, with Viktor Volkov listed under father. The mystery remained unsolved. All these years, his business was thriving, and photos of him and his family regularly appeared in business magazines alongside articles on work-life balance and family values. The irony was not lost on me even as a teenager. "Family is everything," he said in an interview, hugging my mother while my brother and sisters took center stage in the photo. I was always positioned a little further away, as if the photographer sensed this invisible barrier. I learned to live with it, to accept these subtle rejections as normal. I convinced myself that maybe Viktor was just being harder on me because he saw more potential in me. Children are amazingly adept at creating versions of reality that protect them from painful truths. High school was supposed to be a new beginning, but the patterns of behavior established in childhood only became stronger. I threw myself into my studies, graduating with a gold medal. While my brother and sisters maintained respectable BS that pleased Viktor, My perfect grades and A's barely registered on his radar. "Not everyone needs to be an academic genius, Anastasia," he remarked one dinner where my report card was briefly mentioned, after which the conversation quickly turned to Mikkel's football prospects. This disdain for my accomplishments hurt more than overt criticism. My 16th birthday was a particularly painful milestone. In the Volkov family, 16th birthdays were celebrated with great pomp. Mikkel got a brand new Mercedes. They threw a party for Svetlana that cost almost 2 million rubles. For me, my mother planned a modest dinner at an expensive restaurant in the center of Moscow. Victor was 45 minutes late, checked his watch constantly throughout dinner, and left before dessert arrived, citing an urgent business meeting. "Sorry, honey," Mom said, looking down as he left. "You know how important his job is." But later that night, I overheard my parents arguing in the bedroom. "She and your daughter Victor," my mother's voice, usually so controlled, was shaking with anger. "I came, didn't I?" he replied coldly. "You couldn't even stay for 20 minutes for cake. Do you know what kind of signal that sends?" "What do you want from me, Alina?" His voice dropped, but I could still hear it through the door. I provided her with everything she could possibly need. The best schools, clothes, holidays. What else am I supposed to do? "Be a father," Mom said simply. "Love her the way you love everyone else." The silence that followed was deafening. I tiptoed back to my room before I heard his answer, but the lack of immediate denial confirmed what I had always suspected. As college application season approached, I was focusing on the most prestigious schools. When the acceptance letters from Moscow State University and St. Petersburg State University arrived, Mom threw a small, celebratory dinner. "SBBSU is a great choice for a humanities major," Victor commented when she announced her decision to go to St. Petersburg. "But it's far away." Mikkel had made the right choice, staying in Moscow for the higher school of economics. The fact that I was interested in literature and marketing, not business, seemed unimportant to him. Later that week, I overheard another conversation that would haunt me for years. "Studying in St. Petersburg will cost a lot of money after all the scholarships," Mom told Victor in his office. "That's ridiculous," he replied. "Why should I pay for her to study useless English literature 700 kilometers from here? Do you know why you should do this?" Mom replied in a surprisingly firm voice. "We've discussed this before." The conversation was interrupted when they spotted me in the hallway. But those words, "You know why you have to do this," echoed in my head. "What obligation?" my mother would say. What unspoken agreement existed between my parents regarding me? Despite Victor's reluctance, I entered St. Petersburg State University. The distance from Moscow brought long-awaited relief from the constant reminder of my status as an outsider in the family. Having graduated with honors, I had already decided to sharply build my own path in the world. Instead of using the Volkova name, which would have opened doors for me in Moscow's business circles, I used my mother's maiden name on my resume. "I need to know that I can do it on my own," I told her. What I didn't tell her was that I'd rather struggle alone than succeed, thanks to someone who couldn't make himself love me. My first job was at a mid-sized marketing agency in St. Petersburg. The starting salary barely covered a modest apartment and student loans, but it provided something priceless: experience in an industry I loved, completely separate from Victor's influence. I worked 80-hour weeks, took on every challenging project, and studied industry trends in my limited free time. After 2 years, I was promoted to account manager. By the third year, I was leading my own team. The vice president position came to me before I turned 30. In those years, my contacts with the Volkov family were reduced to the obligatory holiday calls. My mother remained my only constant connection with the family. We spoke weekly, and she visited me in St. Petersburg twice a year, always without Victor. During these visits, she seemed more relaxed, more authentic, away from the Volkov family's carefully maintained facade of perfection. At 31, I made the leap from employee to entrepreneur, founding Horizon Marketing, an agency specializing in digital strategy for luxury brands. The risk paid off beyond all expectations. Financial success brought personal freedom. I bought a luxury apartment in the center of St. Petersburg with panoramic windows overlooking the Neva. For the first time, I felt what it meant to be valued for my real contribution, rather than measured by impossible family standards. It was during this period of professional growth that I met Andrew. Unlike previous relationships, which had collapsed partly because of my workaholism and partly because of my secrecy, this relationship seemed different from the start. Andrew, a corporate lawyer with a background in psychology, saw unhealed wounds behind my carefully constructed independence. After hearing my family story, he gently suggested that I see a therapist. "You've been amazingly successful by conventional standards," he said, "but I can see how the mention of your family, especially your father, changes you." I resisted at first, but eventually agreed. Dr. Larina, a family therapist, helped me recognize patterns I had normalized throughout my life. Overactivity, difficulty accepting praise, fear of vulnerability. They all went back to a fundamental question I had never been able to answer. Why couldn't my father love me? Sometimes there's no rational explanation for a parent's inability to bond with a child, Dr. Larina explained. But sometimes there are specific reasons that have nothing to do with the child's worthiness to be loved. Family secrets, birth circumstances. Have you ever considered the possibility that there might be a reason for your father's distance beyond differences in personality? The question hung in the air. The idea that Victor might not be my biological father resurfaced with all its intensity. Life, however, had its own plans. Before I could decide whether to renew contact with Victor, my mother called with news that changed everything. "I have cancer," she said evenly. "Breast cancer, stage 3. That same day, I flew to Moscow. Despite our differences, the Volkovs united in the face of their mother's diagnosis. I took a leave of absence from my company to stay in Moscow for her initial treatment. On her third day in the hospital, an incident occurred that would eventually unravel a decade of secrecy. A nurse came to take blood for additional tests. "We'll have to get her blood type determined again," she mentioned. "There's something wrong with the records." "She's O-negative," I said automatically, remembering that fact from childhood conversations about blood types in our family. Victor and my siblings were B-positive, while my mother and I were both rare B-negative. The nurse looked up in surprise. "I thought you were a friend." The patient's husband mentioned that all of their children had his blood type. After she left, I sat with this information, and the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. While the mother was being treated, I ordered a DNA test. When the results came back 6 weeks later, I opened them alone in my hotel room. The DNA matches section clearly listed my mother and all 3 of my siblings, with the expected percentages for my mother and half-siblings. Viktor Volkov was missing from the list of my genetic relatives. Finally, I chose a quiet day when Mom was feeling relatively strong, and we were alone in her hospital room. "Mom, be careful, man. I have something important to ask you, and I need the truth. Is Victor my biological father?" Tears filled her eyes. "Oh, Nastia," she whispered, taking my hand. I always knew this day would come. The story unfolded slowly, painfully. Shortly before her engagement to Victor, Mom had a brief affair with an old friend, Dmitry Sokolov. One night of nostalgia and champagne led to an unplanned pregnancy. By the time she found out she was expecting, she and Victor had already announced their engagement. "Victor agreed to raise you as his own," she explained, tears streaming down her cheeks. "But he made me promise never to tell anyone, including you. He was building his business, creating his image." "Who is Dmitry Sokolov?" I asked. "Is he alive?" Mom shook her head. "He moved to California before you were born." I never told him. "He died in 2015 of a heart attack." The realization that my biological father had died without ever knowing I existed hit me unexpectedly hard. "Please," my mother begged, squeezing my hand weakly, "don't tell anyone, not now, while I'm fighting this disease." Despite my anger at being lied to for a decade, I couldn't refuse her. True, I waited 35 years. She could have waited a few more months. 6 months later, my mother went into remission. The family celebrated with dinner, where Victor announced plans for a grand celebration of his 66th birthday. "Now that things are better, it's time to celebrate life for real," he declared. "I'm renting a big ballroom in the Metropole. Everyone who wants something will be there, so it's in Moscow." 2 weeks before this magical event, my mother called me. "I told him," she said simply. "He knows that you know." "And what did he say?" I asked. There was a pause. "He said it didn't change anything." "And he asked you not to mention it at his birthday party, for the sake of the family." "Of course." Even now, appearances mattered more than truth. Victor's reputation, his image in the family, remained above all else. "Are you coming to the party?" Mom asked timidly. I couldn't refuse her. "I'll be there," I promised, though a plan was already brewing in my head. "This will be the last time I take part in this family farce." The invitation arrived by courier, heavy, cream-colored paper with embossing. "Are you sure you want to go?" Andre asked. "I need to make a point," I explained. "For 35 years, I've felt like an outsider, wondering what was wrong with me. Now I know it wasn't me. It was his choice, his lies, his inability to love a child who wasn't his biological one." Andre took my hand. "I will be by your side, no matter what you decide." Preparation was essential. I chose a striking emerald green evening gown that showed off my chestnut hair. The same trait that always answered me from the fair-haired Volkov clan. Then the question of a gift arose. Mikhail accidentally let it slip that his father was looking at a new Maybach worth about 25 million rubles. The perfect status symbol for Victor. Actually, I responded to Mikhail's offer to chip in and buy it. "I think I can handle it myself." The next day, I ordered a car and asked for a special card to be included with the keys, on which I wrote, "From the daughter you chose not to love." The large, shabby ballroom of the Metropole Hotel had been transformed into a showcase of wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow on the tables, and a string quartet played softly in the corner. Victor and my mother stood in the center of the room. "Have you arrived?" he stated as I approached. "I wouldn't have missed it," I replied with the same coolness. The dinner seating arrangements placed me at the family table. But furthest from Victor was the physical manifestation of my peripheral status. After dessert came the moment I had both dreaded and anticipated. Victor stood up, tapping his glass. He spoke of his success in business and then came to his family. "But no success can compare to the joy that family gives," he said, pointing to my mother. "And my children are my greatest legacy. Mikhail, who will brilliantly continue the traditions of Volkov development, Svetlana, whose design vision elevates our projects to the rank of art, Dmitri, whose technological innovations prepare our company for the future." Then his gaze shifted to me, and I felt the temperature in the room drop. There was a brief, tense pause. "And Anastasia," he said, his tone noticeably colder, who had chosen her own path away from the family business. Another pause, and then the words that changed everything. "I'm proud of all my children except her. You never fit in, did you, Nastia?" The room went completely silent. At that moment, something inside me crystallized. 35 years of seeking approval, trying to earn a love that was supposed to be given unconditionally, all of it condensed into a single point of perfect clarity. This man had just freed me from any remaining obligation to pretend. I rose slowly from my seat. "You're right, Victor," I said. My voice was even and clear in the silence. I never fit in. Somewhere I thought it was my fault. But now I realize it wasn't my fault. It was yours. I walked up to him and placed the DNA test results on the table in front of him. "You couldn't love me because every time you looked at me, you saw a reminder of a truth you couldn't accept. I wasn't your biological daughter, but I was still a child who deserved love, not 3 decades of calculated indifference." There were sighs and whispers in the room. "You chose the time and place when you publicly humiliated me in front of 300 guests," I interrupted. "I brought you a gift. I took the box with the Maybach key." "A new Mercedes Maybach, but gifts like fatherhood can be reconsidered." I closed the box. "This key, like your love, will remain out of reach." Finally, I turned to leave. Andre came up to me. Thank you all for the clarity this evening has brought. I addressed the audience one last time. Does the truth really set you free? With these words, I turned and walked away, holding the key to the Maybach in my hand. Chaos erupted behind me, but as we walked out of the room, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders that I had carried all my life. For the first time, I was not seeking Viktor Volkov's approval or mourning his absence. I was simply Anastasia. The aftermath of Viktor's birthday struck with the force of a Moscow thunderstorm. By the time Andrei and I got to our room, my phone was already blowing up with notifications. The first call I answered was from my mother. "We talked," she said without preamble. "After you left, we had the most honest conversation of our entire life together. 35 years of silence finally broken." She explained how young and scared she had been, how she had accepted Viktor's terms because they seemed the only way out. Messages from her brother and sisters followed. Mikhail's message was predictably defensive. "Could you settle this privately? Do you have any idea what this would do to the family's reputation?" Svetlana was more conciliatory. "I wish I had known. It explains so much about my father's behavior. We can talk when everyone calms down." Dmitri, the most sensitive of us, simply wrote, "I'm still your brother, DNA be damned." "I love you." 3 days later, Viktor Volkov himself unexpectedly called me. "We need to talk." His voice sounded different, older, more subdued. "In my office today at 2. In his office overlooking central Moscow, he gestured toward a chair, avoiding his imposing desk. "I would like to offer you 500 million rubles, Volkov said sharply. "A clean break. Confidentiality agreement attached." I shook my head. "You still don't get it. It was never about the money. I made my own success." "I don't need or care about your millions." "Then what do you want?" he asked with genuine bewilderment. "Nothing from you." "Not anymore. For years, all I wanted was your love and approval. Now I just want the truth to be acknowledged, not buried under more secrets and legal paperwork." Viktor looked bewildered, confronted with an emotional reality he could neither measure nor control. "The truth is," he said finally, "I tried to love you as my own, but every time I looked at you, I saw another man, my pride. She got in the way. By the time I realized what I had done, the pattern had already been set. It wasn't an apology, but it was perhaps the most honest thing Viktor Volkov ever said to me. "Thank you for at least this bit of honesty," I replied, standing up. The search for Dmitry Sokolov's family began as soon as I returned to St. Petersburg. Less than 2 weeks later, I found his surviving relatives in Sochi, his sister Varvara and 2 children from his marriage, son Roman and daughter Maria. The first phone call to Varvara was one of the most exciting moments of my life. "He never knew," she confirmed after hearing my story, "but he always said he felt like he had left something important behind in Moscow." Our first meeting with my half-brother and sister at a seaside restaurant in Sochi was awkward, emotional, and healing. "You have his eyes," Maria noted, studying my face. "And his terrible sense of humor," Roman added with a grin at my dry comments. They shared stories about their father, his career as an architect, his passion for sailing. They welcomed me into their lives with an openness that stood in stark contrast to my experience with the Volkov family. Over the next few months, I gradually built a relationship with the Sokolov family while simultaneously redefining my boundaries with the Volkovs. My mother and I became closer. Dmitri was the first of the Volkovs to visit me, arriving unannounced. Svetlana came later, too, cautiously re-establishing our connection. Only Mikhail kept his distance, still positioning himself as Viktor's successor. 6 months after that birthday, on a trip to the Black Sea coast, Andrei proposed. "I love you," he said simply, holding out a ring. "Not because of your family history and not in spite of it, but because of who you have become through it all." Our wedding was small. Only those who truly cared about us were present. My mother, Dmitri, Svetlana, the Sokolovs, and friends who became a chosen family. Viktor wasn't invited, but he still sent an expensive gift, which I donated to an organization that supports orphans. A year has passed. My relationship with the Volkovs remains complicated. My ties with the Sokolovs are growing, offering me a new reality. As for Victor, we maintain minimal polite contact. He has never apologized verbally, but his behavior has changed subtly. One thing is clear. I no longer measure my worth by his approval. The little girl who craved her father's love has grown into a woman who understands that some voids cannot be filled by those who created them. Instead, I learned to build my life around these voids, creating a reality rich in chosen connections and genuine love.